This is the Harboring Light. I'm Mary. I give a conservative take about the world around me. So, questions, comments, concerns are greatly appreciated, and ratings are greatly appreciated. And feedback, it contributes to the development and the growth of my podcast. So feel free to give me ratings on the audio platforms that I'm going to list. Just briefly, some of them, and I'm looking to grow to where I am on all of the podcast platforms. And on Substack, you enjoy more of writing version of the podcast I write on Substack. So also, feel free to give a rating or follow me on Substack. It would be greatly appreciated. And feel free to make comments too. So, social media along with email content will be provided for you. And here is a list of some of the audio platforms that I'm on. It's Audible, Amazon Music, Spotify for podcasters, Overcast, Pocket Cast, Audible. Yeah. Okay. And Google Podcasts, just to name a few. So this episode is about folklore. I'm going to break it up in two parts. I'm going to give a synopsis, so to speak, in this episode, and then wrap everything up and give even more of an in-depth thoughts along with that in the second part on Wednesday. All right, here we go. Let's dive in. Okay, folklore is the body of expressive culture, including tales, music, dance, legends, oral history, proverbs, superstitions, and so forth. Common to a particular population that comprises of the traditions of that culture, subculture, or group. Scholars who study folklore are often called folklorists. Much of folklore study has been academic, classifying material and identifying original forms. Applied folklorists, on the other hand, use folklore and other traditional cultural material to address social problems. As the world is increasingly globalized, preservation of traditional folklore and the ongoing development of new materials are important ways and unique cultural expressions can be maintained and their wisdom transmitted to future generations. Folklore generally refers to the body of material in a variety of forms that expresses the traditions of a particular culture. There is no clear-cut definition of the term folklore, mainly because academics of different disciplines study the same material from completely separate perspectives. Scholars of literature focus primarily on structure, narrative styles, content, and genre, while anthropologists view folklore as a measure to understand the views of a culture. Okay, so both pragmatics raise the question of whether folklore can be viewed as a common phenomenon and therefore broken into broad categories or specific cultural artifacts of a given society. Folklorists tend to bridge both worlds. And folklore remains wholly within the control of its practitioners, although within this. It is theirs to remember, change, forget. It is that which is at once traditional and viable. So this is coined by a folklorist by the name of Dan Ben Amos. As as I stated. Okay, so on to the study of folklore. The term folklore was coined in 1846 by the Englishman William Thomas, who wanted to use an Anglo-Saxon term for what was then called popular antiquities. The concept developed as a part of the 19th century ideology of Romantic nationalism, leading to the reshape of oral traditions to serve modern ideological goals. Johann Gottfried von Herder first advocated the deliberate recording and preservation of folklore to document the authentic spirit, tradition, and identity of the German people. The belief that there can be such authenticism is one of authenticity, more along the lines of it, is one of the tenets of the Romantic nationalism that Herder developed. Only in the 20th century did ethographers begin to attempt to record folklore without overt political goals. Standards of identification were devised, and every example was classified by place and date with a view to determine the original forms as well as patterns of distribution. Later developments based on performance analysis regarded each form as an event that emerges from the interaction between performer and audience, and which fulfills a particular role or function in the social group. While the study of folklore remained strong in academic communities, it was not until the mid-20th century that the discipline grew beyond pure research to emerge as a movement that incorporated applications and problem-solving as one of its aims. In 1939, folklorists Benjamin A. Bakken and Alan Lomax coined the phrase applied folklore, akin to applied anthropology and other applied social sciences, as a study concerned with the use of folklore and traditional cultural materials to address or solve real social problems. Bakken's development of the approach emerged from his work on the collection by Federal Writers' Projects of oral narratives of former slaves, when he worked for the Library of Congress. He saw the aspects of this material as having the potential to improve race relations in the United States to combat prejudice. The abolition movement had similarly used the oral narratives of escaped slaves, such as those collected by William Steele in his Underground Railroad records, to draw support for their case. Bakken's landmark, Lay My Burden Down of 45, was the first American book to treat oral testimonies as historical evidence. And it was another 30 years before this became accepted practice. Bakken also worked with Quaker activist Rachel Davis Du Bois to develop public programs to improve race and ethnic relations by incorporating cultural practices and materials into neighborhood events such as festivals and block parties. In the 1960s, other American folklorists began to apply knowledge gained from folkloric sources to address social issues, most notably drawing on folk medicine and the teaching and practice of holistic and cross-cultural approaches to medicine and public health. Folklorists also began to work as consultants in city planning economic development, multicultural education, conservation, and other fields. An outgrowth of applied folklore was the early 1970s movement known as the public folklore, generally credited to Archie Green. All right. Okay, so Archie Green, the American Folklore Society, and the creation of the American Folklore Center at the Folk Life Center at the Library of Congress. The movement was initially called Public Sector Folklore. Soon after this, the creation, the Smithsonian Institute and the National Endowment for the Arts and other nonprofit institutions vested large investments in folklore. Public folklorists are engaged with documentation, preservation, and preservation and presentation of traditional forms of folk arts, craft, folk music, and other genres of traditional folk life. They work in folk arts and the schools programs, presenting master traditional artists to primary and secondary schools and demonstrations in residence. They develop apprenticeship programs to foster the teaching of traditional arts by recognizing masters. They also present traditional music on radio programs such as American Routes on Public Radio International. Occasionally, they produce documentary films on aspects of traditional arts and also sponsor performance arts with singing, dancing, and dramatically present oral folklore to schools and communities. And to add on to this, in the media, a prime example of that is the original Mythbusters. Well, but Mythbusters in general, and the first seasons of Mythbusters, they had a folklorist on set and on their payroll to explain in depth about the aspects of myths and legends and why it is, and to give a all-compass more of a concrete examples of why people think these things and where they come from and how they originate. And I think it breathed more depth to the show and gave the show even more of an interesting impact on society. As the modern world As the modern world becomes more industrial and moves further away from traditional lifestyle communities, the folklorist is in unique position to help integrate older traditions into modern life, as well as continue to collect previously lost genres of folklore. So I want to end on another example of the visual arts, the more along the lines of masterful paintings. So, for example, Peter Bruegel or Peter the Elder. So, and I believe Flemish painter, and the way, and if you're interested, look his name up for those who don't know, but those who are in the know. For example, his paintings depict the aspects of folklore at its finest. So, for instance, Icarus, and you see in the faint distance, faintly, but you can make out in the impression of it, that little feet dangling. And so the tale of him flying too close to the sun, but yet still it pulls back and tells this narrative story of all the people who are in the town who are just going about their daily lives, and they're preoccupied with their own interests, not more along the lines it making the social commentary that their day-to-day aspects of life is what all they see, is what all is in front of them, which is really realistic in the grand scheme of things of how life is. You don't really, when you get down depth into it, the aspects of not really being aware or noticing other things that are around you. It's not that it's any fault of them. It's very clever of making commentary on it, of how that can be in life. And this aspect of this well-known myth, this well-known legend of Icarus, and the aspects of having these fetus goals and taking on and having the aspirations and the aspect of more powerful than your actual abilities, it knocks you down and you get flown back to the earth. And the aspect of him dangling in the water like that, and them just unaware of what happened, and that it just really doesn't matter, is another very fine and masterful touch to that aspect of this legend, that in the grand scheme of things, is it really important? Is it what is the aspect of that in the real society and the real tolls and everyday aspects of people's lives? Does it, when you get down to the heart of when you're taking care of what you need to take care of in your own situations, whether it be family, whether it be your job, whether it be all of these things, when you're enwrapped in that and you take pride in that, and you don't really have the time to think about all these existential things, where does that really fall? Where do these things really lie in the grand scheme of things? But it also heightens the aspect of how folklore is placed in everyday society. It's really something to think about. And also, on the flip hand of that, it also is even more of a commentary of folklore and how it is a common bond to the ordinary aspects of everyday life too, on the other scale of things. All right, so I say that, because of depicting these people in everyday life and how they're in their ways depicting the aspects of folklore, of myths and legends, particularly Sisyphus, or so to speak, on the negative aspect of it, and then always pushing that rock up the hill and coming down short, and all of these different tolls and aspirations and aspects of living in a village versus living in a city, all of these things, and how folklore comes out of that and myths come out of that, living in a society. All right, so this reaches the end of the hovering light. So tune in, turn up, and definitely take care. Bye-bye now.